Okay, people, so this is going to be the follow-up video to a previous video of mine entitled The American Negro Gene Pool. On this video, I'm basically going to do a quick review and give commentary on it. A lot of people got short attention spans. There was a lot of reading involved in the video. And a lot of people are better listeners, so we're going to give some commentary. Here we have the typical modern day African American family. All different shades, facial features, hair textures, and everything. This is wide range of people. Okay, so here we have a picture from the post-slavery era, possibly late 1800s, early 1900s. I want you to pay attention to what these people look like. Everyone in this photo are dark-skinned people with very thick hair. Pretty much everybody. Try to pay attention to these people. Pay attention to what they look like. Basically, all African Americans look the same when you look at these old black and white photos. So here's some sources for those of you who say there was no transatlantic slave trade, there weren't any Africans who came over here. From Bonny alone came 320,000 Negroes to America. Bonny is a slave kingdom, if I'm not mistaken, off the coast of Nigeria. 320,000 Negroes to America. But according to a lot of people, the Atlantic slave trade never happened. It was never too many Africans that came over here. This is just one source. I have plenty of sources for you. So I want you all to read this just to know how deep the American Negro, the African gene pool is. But the so-called sub-Saharan African is the most biological diverse region on Earth. And as the American geneticist Spencer Wells says in his book, The Journey of Man, The Genetic Odyssey, you are more likely to sample extremely divergent genetic lineages within a single African village than you are in the whole rest of the world. This is how deep the gene pool goes. Sources for everything right here, and this was data taken from ethnicities in 1719 through 1820 in Louisiana. Apparently they did these tests on some people who had genealogy or grandparents in Louisiana, and they matched the DNA up to different DNA samples in Africa, and this is what it read. Look at these numbers: 466 Bambara, 922 Mandinga, 597 Wolof. This is just Louisiana. 628 Mina, 358 Yoruba, 524 Igbo, 2,988 Congolese. And now they always told us that this is the area where a lot of African Americans came from. The Congo, Angola area, and the Bight of Benin. A whole lot, and these numbers match. Here's the sources right here for you. But there's never any Africans that came here, according to y'all. Now here's one of the oldest slaves who lived that we know of, Cudjo Lewis. I want y'all to read what he said right here, who he was captured by. Captured by Dahomey warriors of Amazons on one of their cruel excursions. The Dahomey Amazons is the all-female army that was depicted in the movie Black Panther that a lot of y'all love to praise. and worshiped so much, this is what they did. They were notorious slave raiders. And here's a gentleman right here saying how they captured him and how cruel they were. They're the reason he ended up here. Now, look right here again. These are pictures of African Americans post-slavery era, late 1800s, early 1900s. They're all dark-skinned. Who do they look like? These are Igbo people. Well, who do they look like? Take an educated guess. But a lot of y'all will show pictures, some lookalike pictures to Indians or all this crazy stuff, man. Look at these people. Look at the comparisons. Here you have on a cotton field, African American lady holding a cotton basket on top of her head. Here you have Africans doing the same. This is a cultural thing. She carried on some of her cultural practices even after coming over here. Do not see the similarities. Okay, now this breakdown is probably the start right here. In Africa, there was a lot of different migration wave patterns going on through south, central, west, northeast, all over. So you have many different ethnic groups who are different in features and cultures, moving all around, mixing in together in the first of all, and settling in different places. So Africa is already a melting pot of different ethnic groups. Here's an example of a few from around the continent. These are some of the heavy concentrated places. 23.13% of African American slaves came out of the Congo Angola area. Now remember a few slides ago that DNA percentage that they did in Louisiana, it was 6,000 Congolese. This matches up. 14.46 from Ghana, 17.01% from Gambia, 16.34% from Nigeria. Now, the majority of African American people, the stock of Africans that we come from, is what would be considered the Bantu people, sub-Saharan Africans. They typically look the same. These are the people that inhabit the coast of West Africa. Sub-Saharan Africans. They look familiar? So, here in America, you have Europeans coming over here to the new land from all over different places of Europe. And you also had some Asians, some Chinese immigrants coming over here looking for work. They took accepted slaves from the west coast of Africa. And these are some of the places that it went. South America, Central America, North America, the Caribbean islands. We all know this. These are some of the ethnic groups, except for not really the same people. So we ended up coming here into these people's lands. These are the people who ruled this land. These are the people who claim indigenous to this land. These are the Native American Indians. They are not black. They are not African Americans. We don't have anything to do with these people. These are the people who ruled this land, the American Native Indians. These are the people whose lands we ended up in. Now right here you have, in the early slavery days, some of the Africans were mixing in with some of the Native Indian tribes. Apparently, according to sources, it happened a lot in the beginning, like maybe 1600s, 1700s, not so much towards the end though. So this is where the Black Indian comes from. The Black Indian comes from a mixture of an African mixing with a Native American woman. Creates the Black Indian. So Black Indians are not aboriginal here to this land. They are not indigenous. They are not the original inhabitants. Black Indians come from a mixture of one parent Native American Indian and another one African. That is where the Black Indian comes from. So I want you all to notice right here, you have another picture of African American families here. Let's say about maybe the 50s, 60s. Now notice here in the mid 1900s, you see in the Black family, you see a lot more lighter skinned people popping up in these pictures. A few slides ago, in the pictures from the black and white pictures from the post-slavery era, you didn't see any light skinned people in the Black families. But now you're starting to see a lot. A lot of mulatto people in Black families now being classified as Negro now. Now, post-slavery era, 1950s. Notice the difference in the dynamics of what the Black family looks like. Now in the mid-1900s, you see a lot more light-skinned African Americans. And why is that? Let's explain. How do you go from this to nearly 100 years later to this? These are African Americans 2021. This comes from hundreds of years of mixing all of these different ethnic groups coming here from Africa, mixing in with Europeans and Native Americans and whoever else. This is what you get, a melting pot. What you basically get is a new ethnic group. The American Negro really is a new ethnic group altogether. All these different variations. So try to pay attention to this list. Now these are old terms, not really relevant or used today. But this is what a lot of people would consider different racial groups here in America back in the day. A mulatto is a Negro and a white person together. A quadroon is a mulatto and a white together. An octoroon is a quadroon and white together. A sambo, which a lot of us are descendants of generations of sambos, is a mulatto and a Negro together. I'm trying to remember this list right here. Now here you have all three of these people were labeled, considered mulattoes on paper. But later on, as time went on, were labeled Negro, except for this woman. Now this is my great grandmother. This is one of her sisters. This is one of her brothers. She went on to classify herself as white. So she lived her life later on to be a white woman. She passed for white. While these other two also could have possibly passed for white but chose not to. Later on were labeled Negro, but at first mulatto. Okay, so everybody know about the one drop rule. You got one drop of anything, you are considered Negro. Okay, so here you have what you could call a family tree line. Every generation it doubles or quadruples. You have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents. So understand this. If you claim to have one grandmother who was Cherokee, in which she probably wasn't, that does not make you a Cherokee or Native American Indian. If one of your great-grandparents was a Native American Indian, you still have 7 other great-grandparents. So one is a Native American Indian like you all claim to be so much. And the other 7 are what you would consider African. What do you think that you're going to be by the time it gets to you? By the time it circles down 2-3 more generations, you less than 5% of what she is. Because the other 7 great-grandparents' DNA is going to overshadow hers. If you put 7 white balls in a raffle and 1 black ball, what are your chances of what color ball you're gonna choose? It's more likely it's gonna be a white ball. Okay, so here's this. Again, I want y'all to look at this one more time because this is gonna be pivotal. This is gonna be pivotal to remember later on. So remember these labels. This woman would be considered black or 100% black, meaning her African DNA is considered to be 100% a match. This woman is what we consider to be mixed in these days. Back in the day, this woman probably would have been considered a quadroon. This woman would have been considered an octoroon. This woman would be considered white. Now, remember the list from the old terms a couple of slides ago. A Negro and a mulatto creates what they called a sambo. A Negro father and a mulatto woman have a child. It's going to look like this. A brown skin or light brown skin child. They used to call these children sambos. A sambo was somebody who they called who had an Indian parent and a Negro parent. Here's some examples of people who would have been considered sambos because they have one mulatto or perhaps biracial parent and the other one black. Carmelo Anthony, Kobe Bryant, Terrence Howard, Stephon Curry, just a few examples. Here's some more examples. This woman. Remember, most sambos are what they're considered sambos are going to be light brown skinned people. This woman. One mulatto mother, black father. Same here. This is my grandmother and this is her sister. This is my grandfather again, my grandfather, mulatto father, black mother. A lot of us come from generations and generations of intermarriages between mulatto women and Negro fathers. A lot of us come from generations and generations of that. Some more examples. Generations and generations of mixing between mulattoes and blacks, and then those sambos mixing together. This is what you get. Put the list up here one more time for you. Now, a mulatto and a white person creates what they called back then a quadroon. A mulatto mother, a white father creates this child. The child would be considered a quadroon. This is a mulatto woman. This is her black mother. This is her white husband or whoever. This is their child. This child would be considered a quadroon. These are people who they would have considered back then quadroons, meaning one parent white, the other one mulatto or mixed. These are some examples. This is what they look like today. This is the term they would be considered about 100 years ago or two. Here's more examples. This woman is my great-great-grandmother on my father's side. If I'm not mistaken, I think her mother or father was actually white. And one of her other parents were mixed. So this is what you get. Now, octoroon, which is a quadroon and a white person together creates a quadroon. This is a quadroon woman, her white husband. You have their octoroon child. Octoroon is basically a child who has one drop of black in them. At most, 25% black. Here's some examples of people who would have been considered octoroons, which is basically people who have one drop of black in them. Some more examples. Octoroons, at most 25% black, at most. These people will probably have less than a drop, like maybe 2 to 5% black. Now here we have these pictures. I'm gonna open up another topic. A lot of people don't know about the early intermarriages between blacks and the Chinese immigrant workers. A lot of people don't know that it's mixing a lot. 1880 Louisiana census counts 57% of Chinese were married to African Americans. Blacks were mixing with the Chinese a lot in some places. The census agent responsible for counting the Chinese in Augusta, Georgia, reported in 1905 that several of the 34 Chinese men there were married and had families, all with Negro or mulatto wives. Here's the sources for you, for those of you who don't believe. A lot of people who are considered Blasians, this is nothing new. Blacks have been mixing with Asians for a long time. Here you have Blasians, as some people like to call them. One black parent, one Asian parent. This is a product of having one black parent, one Asian parent. Black and Asian ancestry. This is what you get. Here, these are some examples of people who actually have Asian ancestry. One parent Asian, the other one black. A lot of people don't know this. People here on this list actually have Asian ancestry. A parent or a grandparent who is Asian. So, with all of this mixing that's been going on between African slaves who came here, the Native American Indians and the whites and Chinese, you get different variations now in African Americans. Mixing with the Irish and all of the Europeans that came here, you get ginger heads. All sorts of different variants you get now. Now you have African Americans with ginger hair and freckles. This is what you get from years and years of mixing. Moles, you get African Americans now with moles and hazel brown eyes. Now remember, this comes from generations and generations of mixing. You didn't see people that look like this on those old black and white pictures at the post-slavery era. You didn't see any people that look like this. You get hair like this now from generations and generations of mixing. Generations of mixing. The American Negro is a whole new ethnic group, which comes from generations of mixing. just a few examples of some of the popular African ethnic groups who a lot of us have ancestry from. It's the Igbos, the Asantis, the Yorubas, the Wolofs, the Fons, the Dahomey Amazons. Now, just let me stop here. Like, the Dahomey Amazon all-women army are probably about 75% responsible for all of the African Americans that ended up here on the slave trade. They were notorious slave raiders, known for their cruelty. King Gizo of Dahomey once sacrificed 800 slaves for some type of ceremony. These are how many slaves they had in their possessions that they didn't care for. They would sacrifice hundreds of them at a time. So they surely had plenty more to spare to give to Europeans in exchange for guns. Cudjo Lewis was a victim of them. They captured him and sold him to Europeans. That's how he ended up here. For those of y'all who like to celebrate all of the women on Black Panthers who they were supposed to be representing, there you go. The Bakongo people, a lot of ancestry from here. The Fulani people, the Mandinka people, the Mubundu people, and I think this is a Queen Zinka. She too was known for her cruelty and for having many slaves. She did not care about being cruel to her slaves or selling other fellow Africans, whether you want to call them prisoners of war or whatever. She was not a nice woman. I'm just being non-biased. We have to be non-biased here, not show favoritism or romanticize everybody from Africa. They sold Africans to Europeans. The Europeans did not come in Africa and strong arm us out of there. We were sold in exchange for items. The Malagasy people from Madagascar, a lot of y'all are like, well, we didn't come from Madagascar, that's all the way off the east coast of Africa. Well, let me show you this. My grandma came from Virginia. When my grandma died, she was 110 years old. She said she was a Madagascar Negro. The East Indian Slave Company. They brought slaves from India and Indonesia to South Africa. 1,195 Indians, 1,033 Indonesians brought to the Cape of Africa, the Cape of South Africa. Had people from Madagascar getting caught up in that slave too and brought to the coast of South Africa. And in small instances, some of these slaves from South Africa ended up going as slaves to ports in West Africa. And that's how some people from Madagascar got here. Approximately 400,000 enslaved Africans were transported to America during the transatlantic slave trade, and only 4,800 of them were from Madagascar. That is just 1%. So if only 1% of 100% is 4,800, imagine how much is 70% or 80%. For those of you who said, there weren't that many Africans coming over here as slaves. So right here, for a lot of us who claim our grandparents or great-grandparents were American Indians, now that we have established that there were actual East Indians here in America as slaves. Maybe she did not mean that she was a Native American Indian, but an East India Indian. Here's a runaway slave ad. An East India Indian named Thomas Greenwich wears his own hair, which is long and black. A lot of people like to say, "Oh, our great grandmother who was Indian, she had long black hair. I know she was an Indian. She had long black hair." Well, she may not have been a Native American Indian. She could have been mixed with black and white, or she could have been an East India Indian, because they were here. We got some more sources. An East Indian belonging to Mr. Halen. They, a black slave and an East Indian slave, went from. Now, notice that they distinguished the black slave from the East Indian slave before y'all start to say, "Oh, well, that was us. The East Indians was us." No. They knew how to tell apart a black slave from West Africa and an East Indian slave. There was a distinction. So let's start talking about the DNA percentages of the Ancestor test. Here you have a typical African American woman. Now, in this raffle, I want you to think about everything we just talked in the last slides. You have all these different ethnicities in your gene pool going back 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 20 generations. When you're in your mother's stomach being made, all of this DNA is being shuffled around. Whichever one you have the highest percentage of is what more than likely you're gonna come out looking like. This is a DNA shuffle. "27% Nigerian, 17% Cameroon Congo, 10% England, 10% Portugal," as expected. It's a taboo. A lot of us don't like to hear this, but we all know that a lot of us have at least 5% through 10% of European ancestry in us. We all know this. We've been here for hundreds of years mixing with these people. We are not a pure race. The DNA shuffle, we've been here for generations and generations of mixing. Let's see what hers came out. 35% Cameroon Congo, 29% Nigeria, 3% Ireland Scotland, 10% England Wales, Northwestern Europe. (71.5% Sub-Saharan African, 17.1% European, 2.6% East Asian and Native American, time that you're in your mother's stomach, you getting DNA put in your body from so many generations back. 10, 15, 20 generations back. Let's see what this DNA shuffle came out as. 65.4% West African, 14.9% Northwestern Europe, 2.6% Native American. So again, all of these balls, different colored balls in here, represent different ethnic groups that you have in your gene pool. You're gonna have more of one particular type of gene pool, of one particular ethnic group in your gene pool than you are of others. 72% Sub-Saharan African, 25.4% European. All the balls in this raffle represent the different ethnic groups that you have in your gene pool. 74.3% West African, 11.1% Northwestern Europe, 0.2% Native American. .7% European, as expected. 73.4% Sub-Saharan African. Now look at this. Now, 18 generations ago, you have 1 million ancestors. So before you claim that you are one of those 1 million ancestors, you have to remember all of the other ones. You can't just claim one when you go this many generations back, or even just a few generations back. So let's go over this again. These are your grandparents, your great-grandparents, great-grandparents. The list just doubles and quadruples the more you go back. If this woman here you claim is a Cherokee Indian, in which she most likely is not, but let's just say so, and the rest of all of your great-great-grandparents are black, by the time it gets down to you, you are probably less than 5% of whatever she is. Because all of the DNA from your other great-grandparents being of the same ethnic group, or having the same DNA is going to overshadow hers. So it's not wise to just claim to be the same thing as whatever one of your great-great-grandparents was if you don't know what all of the other ones were. So keep that in mind. So whoever on this list who y'all think is a Hebrew Israelite or a Native American Indian or a Moor, Egyptian, or Ninja Turtle, point them out on this list. You have to know your ancestry before you make these false claims, spreading misinformation. These are of your great-great-grandparents. Even if one of them is a Native American Indian, by the time it gets down to you, that doesn't make you one, depending on what all the rest of them were. Here you go again. Who on this list in your family tree is a Hebrew Israelite? Point them out. Which one? How far back? So that's about all. We have to stop spreading misinformation and learn genealogy. Our genealogy. Now, I don't mean watching YouTube videos or reading books in the Bible or whatever, or reading books about something that happened thousands of years ago or overseas. That is not where you need to start. That's just spreading misinformation. Learn your genealogy from generation and generation up, from your mother and father to your grandparents to great grandparents. Please do not spread misinformation. This is just embarrassing the black community and is making it more evident that we have a self-identity crisis. This is just very embarrassing. So we've been here for hundreds of years mixing with different ethnic groups. So you're going to get different variants. That's why we look a lot different now. Kind of like a new ethnic group that came from years of mixing. So when we're in our mother's stomach being created, all of those different ethnic groups in our gene pool is being shuffled around.